All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And good evening, one and all, and welcome back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm your host and your guide as together we will cross this time-space continuum to a place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until until midnight, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and in Ontario on your hometown radio, Classic 1220 CFAJ, streaming us on Classic 1210 CFAJ. Or is it classic1220.ca, I should say. Wow, a lot of things happening these days. I still have my fight going on with the homeless situation here in St. Catharines. It seems that the government has forgotten the rights of the people in the Charter of Freedom, that we too have rights. It's just not the homeless who have the rights. It's the people who do the tax paying, the people who actually contribute to society that have rights as well. You know, it's very easy for all the do-gooders who live nowhere where the homeless decide to pitch their tents and make a mockery of justice and a mockery of criminality, where there's open prostitution, open drug use, you know, syringes all over the place, crack pipes all over the place, spoiled condoms all over the place. And, you know, this is okay because they have their rights. Well, too darn bad, because we have our rights too. And I, for one, am sick and tired of them. I'm tired of people getting physically assaulted, physically abused. I'm tired of the Canadian Criminal Code just being laughed at by the homeless people because they have nothing to lose. Absolutely nothing. You know, their idea of a wonderful evening is getting high on crack or doing whatever it is they do, because they don't have to work. They don't have to pay taxes. They get away with scot-free. And 90% of these people enjoy their life. They don't want to be part of society. And I'm just a little tired of it, especially when my wife gets assaulted outside in front of our own place by these degradants of society. And I'm asking the Exo Nation to number one, contact your local politicians and tell them if you're fed up too. We have an online petition at www.change.org/Gale Crescent. That's GALECRESCENT. And we also have a website that tells you everything about our story and how our rights as taxpayers and honest law-abiding citizens are being abused and neglected. And that's at www.galecrescent.com. Well, now that I've got that off my chest, my guest this hour is a good friend of the X Zone. His name is Doug ELWELL, and he is an author of a number of great books. Let's see, Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man, and The End of Age. We've got, let me see, what else has Doug written? Mysterious World Ireland, Mysterious World, and then, of course, Doug, how many books have you written?
There's 4 now, I think 3 or 4 now. I'm working on number 4. The 3 big ones are Mysterious World Ireland, The Riddle of the Sphinx, and Planet X, The Sign of the Son of Man, and In the Age. I'm still working on giants I've been working on for the last 10 years. I was trying to build businesses and get enough money to retire on, so I don't have to worry about money anymore. But once I get that wrapped up this year, probably next year, I'll get back to writing and finally get the Giants book published.
Well, welcome back to the X Zone, my friend. I'm sorry that I had to start on that diatribe, but it's just getting a little too ridiculous that it just can't be ignored anymore. Like, we've had homeless issues here now for, 10 years? And it seems it's getting worse, and nobody's doing a damn thing about it.
It would seem that the government is so concerned about the plight of the common man would find a solution, make that a priority. I would think just reusing old buildings and letting them live there. There's probably abandoned houses all over the place they could use.
I also suggest using the armories, because we're not at war. We've got plenty of armories throughout the province of Ontario that I know of, and of course throughout the other provinces. You also have empty schools. You have empty buildings that are owned by the municipality. It's not that the solution isn't there. It's just like, why doesn't somebody do something about it? It's just got to the ridiculous point. Anyway, Doug, tell our listeners about you. How did you get into writing about the mysterious world that you write about?
Well, back when I was in college, I was looking for evidence for the signs of second coming of Christ. And so I started studying about astronomy and planets in the solar system. What could this sign be? And I also thought maybe it has something to do with the mysterious star of Bethlehem mentioned in Matthew 2. And so I studied the Star of Bethlehem theory to see what could that be. Maybe it was the same thing. The big three theories on the Star of Bethlehem were a conjunction of planets, a comet, or a supernova. And I went through all those theories and found they didn't really fit the criteria of Matthew 2. And so when I was about to give up on finding an answer to the enigma of the Star of Bethlehem, I came across Zechariah Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet. And when I was going to college at Illinois University, I was getting a degree in cinema photography. I wanted to be a filmmaker. And that kind of changed my life, because I realized I had not only found an answer what the Star of Bethlehem probably was, but actually what the sign of the Son of Man would probably be, the one mentioned in Matthew 24:30, as just as the Star of Bethlehem was going to preceded Christ's first coming, and as the Star of Bethlehem, it would also precede his second coming as a sign of the Son of Man at the end of the age. And the only two things that could fit that description are either it would have to be an inner solar system object, which would be either a comet or a planet. And since the objects described in Matthew 2 and Matthew 24 are very, very large, very easily visible objects that are visible for probably months, because it would have taken the Magi probably 2 or 3 months to travel from Persia to Bethlehem. It was probably a planet, because comets don't last more than a couple of weeks.
Right.
And so I came to the conclusion that there is probably another planet in our solar system. And when I started studying Planet X theory, which is a legit theory put together by this astronomical community when trying to find additional planets beyond the planet Neptune, that it was an actual theory that was legitimate. So even though Sitchin was a fringe theorist, his basic idea of Planet X being possibly part of behind the mystery of some of the ancient creation epics of the Babylonians and Sumerians and various Mesopotamian peoples, include possibly the Hebrews. I realized I'd come up on something very deeply important. And so I've been following it since that time. I started doing Mysterious World as a travel guide, mysteriousworld.com, which is still up there, and it's still the old style, but it still has some interesting articles. You can go to mysteriousworld.com/archives to find all of the old articles. They're all for free. But I was writing the book on Planet X in the background the whole time, trying to figure out and updating with the latest material. There's a lot of citing a lot of material about Planet X in the late 1980s and the 90s, because the Voyager probes had passed by them, the outer planets Uranus and Neptune, and found a lot of erratic behavior by Uranus and Neptune, which can only be caused by the near flying by of a large planet-sized object. So Planet X theory was, even though it was dying on the vine because of a lack of evidence for it, when they did the Voyager probe, got that data back, the outer planets Uranus and Neptune were so screwed up that only a planet-sized object could have caused the anomalies we see out there. And so the Planet X theory was powerfully reborn, and the scientific community continues to search for it. They call it Planet 9 now because Pluto has been demoted to an escaped satellite of Neptune, which they also attributed to the near flyby of Planet X. And so I've been following that ever since, realizing this is a legitimate theory. It's a mainstream astronomic theory, and it answers a lot of questions about not only the creation of the Earth, but also the nativity with the Star of Bethlehem, and also the sign of the Son of Man, which will precede his second coming.
So, how come we don't hear more about Planet X or the Planet 9 now? It seems to be that it's kind of been put in the back burners again until the scientific community comes up with something astonishing.
They haven't done anything else with it because if there is evidence for it, they're not telling us about it. And nothing else has passed by the outer solar system since Voyager.
Right.
It took decades to get out there. So it's very restricted as what we can do using standard spacecraft, which are very slow by comparison to, spaceships and UFOs and things like that they see in science fiction. So in science fiction shows, you can get out there in a matter of minutes. It was taking years for our normal probes to get out there, and they're still traveling, actually. They stopped giving off telemetry a while ago, but they're still searching. They actually show up in some of the old Star Trek movies, too. They're so far out that's possible that some of them are still findable and could be even captured by alien civilizations. That was, of course, the point of some of them. They actually had alien messages on them just in case they were found by alien civilizations. But we were looking for God kind of in a way, and we haven't found him yet, but it's possible that he is hiding from us. And people have theorized that the Planet X is invisible because it has a large cloud of dust and gases around it. That theory is because, according to Sitchin, Planet X interacted catastrophically with the planet Earth, and actually the outer planets as well. Uranus is tilted almost on its side. It's like a 150-degree tilt.
Right.
So the bottom of the planet is almost pointing very close to the sun. And it has a ring system that was formed after it was tilted. A moon is like a 10-to-1 ratio of being very elliptical, something like that. Just a very strange thing you would not find in a planet that had formed normally as a result of the natural nebular hypothesis, where all the planets kind of formed out of this solar disk that spun out from the sun as it was forming. This was very different. And particularly Neptune, it looks like Neptune was probably the planet that captured Planet X, or that captured Planet X, because Planet X theoretically came in from beneath our solar system. It was captured by Neptune, probably. And as a result, Neptune was tilted over. But Planet X's angle, its direction was dramatically changed so that it was much more in line with the ecliptic. The current theory in Planet X's orbit is that it goes above and below our solar system, the plane of the ecliptic.
All right, Doug, please stand by. We've got to take our break. Exonation Doug ELWELL is our special guest of this hour. His website, www.mysteriousworld.com. And then go to /journal. That's www.mysteriousworld.com /journal. This is the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell. Please go to www.change.org /Gale Crescent. Sign the petition. Show the world that, we taxpayers and honest citizens have rights too. We'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. Doug Elwell is our special guest this hour. www.mysteriousworld.com/journal. Doug, so where exactly do we get the correlation between Planet X and the Star of Bethlehem?
Well, that's just my theory, but some people I think may have thought of that, but they've never written about it. My theory was that Star of Bethlehem was the recurrent object in our solar system, a planet that comes back every 2,000 years or so. That was based on sightings that go as far back as the birth of Abraham. Abram, the father of the Jews and many other Semitic peoples, was an ancient patriarch who lived in the Middle East. I think it was Matthew. Start talking about Abraham in the book of Genesis, chapter 12. And really, the Bible is the first 11 chapters about a backstory of the foundation of the nation of Israel, of which the father of which was Abraham. And so Abraham, the story of Abraham and the story of Israel is really what the Bible's all about. But the major points I've noticed, beginning, middle, and end, all have to do with some astronomical events of a serious nature that had a very important effect on Earth. In the beginning, the creation, according to Sitchin, was caused when the planet X entered into our solar system, interacted with a planet, the primordial Earth, when it orbited in a different place in the solar system, which is where the asteroid belt is now between Mars and Jupiter. It moved that planet by gravitational force and probably striking it with one or more of its satellites, as Zechariah Sitchin theorizes, and I think he's right. It shattered the Earth into a couple of different major pieces, one which became the moon, and the parts of that became what's known as the asteroid belt, which is only the shattered remnants of a much larger planet in this theory. And the larger part of the Earth went along with the moon farther and closer to the sun, where it became the Earth as we know it. The reason that explains why there's a bunch of rocks floating out of space, which would make up an object less than 1/10 the size of our moon, not nearly enough to form a planet. But if it's seen as remnants of a previous planet, which is shattered and moved, it makes perfect sense. Astronomers have also found water ice on the asteroids in the asteroid belt, which could only have happened if there was a water-bearing body with them. Our water normally does not occur naturally. It's actually chemically bound with water-bearing minerals, hydrous minerals, such as olivine peroxide. In order to release it, you have to apply pressure to it, and the water is released. And so, when the Bible says calls the two heavens, the firmament, and they say the heavens above, the waters above, and the waters below. The waters above probably refers to the waters on the asteroid belt, which the word firmament, which is rakia in Hebrew, literally means something that is shattered and spread out in a circle. That is, and so the rakia, or the firmament we see in Genesis, is actually describing the asteroid belt, which could only have happened if something that was previously there that was shattered and spread out. So I think Sitchin's theory about that was correct.
So where does Sitchin get his information from?
That was a very good question. I wondered about that. How could he possibly figure this out? I mean, This is fairly advanced. So he wrote this back in the early 70s. And the Planet X theory was around, but our scientific understanding was still relatively primitive. I think what it was is that he was actually a Jewish Freemason from the Azerbaijan area. He lived there, and his ancestry from there. That was just northwest of Persia, which is where the Magi were. And so I'm guessing the Freemasons get the knowledge of the Magi, which they would have inherited all that knowledge. They're kind of the modern day Magi. And he carried that as part of their tradition. And it's possible that they released it purposely as part of a timed release of information sometime in the future as part of their plan to introduce the idea of Planet X. And I think that he wrote that book to kind of teach us, the people of the future, hey, this is what's actually happening. This is important key understanding. And so people like me could pick up the ball and run with it and explain and put the pieces together at the end of time,
right
before Jesus' return. Otherwise, no one, if he hadn't written that, I wouldn't have figured it out. And if I had written my book, there would be nobody talking about it at all. So it might be that I'm passing on very important, very ancient information, which have been held by the Magi and their descendants for thousands of years.
Okay, but how do we know the information is correct? that Sitchin wrote about.
We cannot. We can only see it as a theory that happens to fit the facts. Now, like I said, with the asteroid belt being there, it should not be there.
Right.
And Earth is kind of too perfect. If you've ever studied it, that the nature of the Earth and how life on Earth exists, both the axial tilt, the rotation rate, the distance from the sun, the moon, the distance the moon rotates from us, its mass, how it churns the Earth with its gravity just right to keep things flowing in the oceans. Everything's put together in just such a way that if any of those factors and several more were not met fairly precisely, life on Earth as we know it could not exist. And even if it was a few million miles closer or farther away from the sun, it would be either too hot or too cold to support life. If it were out as far as the asteroid belt, it would be far too cold. And so a watery planet would simply be an ice planet. But farther in, it would be a mist and steam planet. But where it is now, there's the perfect balance of hot and cold with how the Earth rotates quickly, relatively quickly. 24 hours is pretty quick. For example, the inner two planets, Mercury and Venus, they only revolve around the sun. They rotate around the sun fairly quickly, but the revolutions maybe 5 times per year, I think, for Venus, something like that. And so they rotate very slowly. And Venus actually rotates backwards from the other planets. The two inner planets have formed exactly the way they should have, according to the nebular hypothesis, where it said they just kind of slowly formed out of gas and dust. It didn't have any particular unusual characteristics, no moons, no axial tilt, no rapid rotation rate that we see pretty much all the other planets from the Earth outwards, indicating that probably Planet X not only interacted with the outer planets, it probably interacted with every planet that has an axial tilt, fast rotation rate, moons, rings, and so forth. And every planet from Earth on outwards has one of those characteristics. But Mercury and Venus don't. That indicates that the only 2 planets in our solar system that had not interacted with Planet X. And they look exactly as planets should look if they just formed naturally and were undisturbed by an interloper like Planet X. Every other planet shows exactly the same characteristics a planet would have if they did interact with an interloper. And that's what by itself is almost pretty much proof that there had been interactions with objects passing through our solar system. Whether Planet X or some other object, there may have been many objects passing through our solar system. When the Earth was formed in the original nebula, and all stars are formed in a nebular cloud of gas and dust, and then they form gradually over time as some of the gas and dust attract itself together into a ball and kind of gradually accumulates. During that process of formation, there's a resistance from the center of that cloud, and the combined force causes a rotation, which forms a huge cloud, like a disk cloud of dust, which goes out for maybe hundreds of millions of miles. And so every single one of those planets should have been exactly the same as the parent. Should have had no axial tilts, relatively slow rotation rates, no moons. They have no significant geographical characteristics, no oceans, no huge craters where water could fill. They're just very dull, very barren, and lifeless, and just kind of nothing planets, not even mountains or anything. But what we see from the Earth on outwards is a very, very exotic solar system, which has obviously been interacted with by other planets. And as it was forming in that nebula, probably our sun interacted with other stars also in formation, and they have traded material, other planets, and there may have been countless planets coming in of our solar system. But the most important one was Planet X, which appears, according to scientific theory, mainstream scientific theory, not such no fringy stuff. They believe it was captured by the outer planets, and over time it's been gradually precessing. Every time it comes in, it gets a little bit closer to the sun every 2,000 years, and it's been kind of moving slowly and slowly for many millions of years to the point where it passed Earth and got close enough to catastrophically interact with it. And it may have been moving in closer since that time, though Sitchin believes it actually still only goes as far as the asteroid belt. It's possible that its orbit was altered when it passed out of the solar system last time it left, when it appears the star of Bethlehem. And as it comes back, it might be interacting with Jupiter or some of the outer planets, so that this time might come a lot closer. I think it's kind of implied by the biblical text that Planet X will not come just as far as the asteroid belt. It may come sort of between the orbits of Mars and Earth, close enough to disturb us gravitationally. And since it brings a lot of material in it left over from the giant impact, where its moon, one or more of its satellites struck Earth, it threw up a huge amount of gas and dust into space, much of which was captured by Planet X's orbit, or its gravitational pull. And that explains why we can't see it, because it's still surrounded to this day by a huge cloud of gas and dust, which completely obscures it and absorbs all light and energy, making it almost impossible to view unless you have very sophisticated telescopes. And that's why we can't see it, but scientists maybe can, because if you use infrared, you might be able to see it against the background stars. And so what was interesting was back in the 1980s, I think it was early 80s, there was a satellite, an infrared astronomical satellite called IRAS, which was an acronym for Infrared Astronomical Satellite. They claimed they found a Planet X-like object approaching us from the outer solar system. But that was quickly hushed up. But later on, Ronald Reagan, president, came up with this rather cryptic statement saying, wouldn't it be interesting if we suddenly realized there was another civilization coming towards us, possibly to attack us? Wouldn't it be interesting how all the nations of the world would gather together to defend against that threat? Mm-hmm. And so that just came out of left field. One wonders why he did that. Planet X theorists believe that he was actually talking about how Planet X might actually be approaching, and might become visible within our lifetime. And if so, it's potentially a threat to Earth, because even though it might not hit Earth again, it probably won't, because that would require a great deal of precision. God himself would have to guide that shot. But there's enough asteroids around it from the original catastrophic confrontation many millions of years ago that some of those asteroids will probably strike Earth, and that might account for some of the cataclysms described in the book of Revelation with the seals and the trumpets and the bowls. Particularly the trumpets sound like they're asteroids and comets passing through its atmosphere or possibly striking it. So,
all right, Doug, we have to take another break. Please stand by. Exonation, Doug ELWELL is our special guest, mysteriousworld.com/journal. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Geez, I forgot where I was there for a moment. And you're listening to us on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and on CHSC. That's the old call sign for the new Classic 1220, and that's classic1220.ca. I'll be back on the other side of this break, so whatever you do, don't go away. Doug ELWELL is my guest, Planet X, and much more.
Something's wrong between us that your laughter cannot hide, and you're afraid to let your eyes meet mine. And lately when I love you, I know you're not satisfied.
And welcome back, everyone. Again, if you'd like to sign our petition, it is at www.change.org/Gale Crescent, or visit www.galecrescent.ca. All the information is there, and there's links to signing our petition there. After all, we the people seem to be neglected, or getting neglected, as members of society these days. You know, we pay the taxes, and yet we've got to suffer the brunt of the inability of government to do their jobs right. So that's www.change.org/Gale Gale Crescent, and www.galecrescent.ca. Doug Elwell is our guest, and his website is mysteriousworld.com/journal. Doug, how come if Planet X is so significant and poses such a potential threat, why isn't the scientific community really getting all over it?
Because if it is approaching us, it could be a potential threat to us. And so I think what they're doing is they're waiting to see what happens before they announce it. There might be other things going on too. I mean, Book of Revelation talks about battles between angels and demons. Revelation 12 talks about Satan being thrown out of heaven down to earth. These things might be happening at the same time as kind of a planned thing. And so there might be kind of a disclosure event, but it may be something where we didn't plan it, but it just kind of happens.
Mm-hmm.
The implications of Revelation 12 is that Satan and his forces are maybe engaged in some sort of a space battle, like Star Wars or Star Trek type thing. They're flying around in ships and they get defeated. And so they're forced to go back to their last redoubt on Earth, where they basically take over the Earth and tyrannize the peoples of Earth at that time, possibly even enslave them with technology. But I've talked about that in other times. I have theories about what they're planning on doing. I don't want to discuss that necessarily right now, but basically, if that's the case, then we can see probably a huge armada of UFO crafts and other types of ships descending from the sky just before Planet X reappears, and very much a kind of a Star Wars situation where the rebels are running away from the Death Star and the Empire. But in this case, the Empire isn't necessarily the bad guys, depending on your point of view. And so people have to make a hard choice at that time.
If we're theorizing all of this based on the Bible, how can we be so sure and certain at this time in our evolution that the Bible is really the book that it claims to have been? How can we put so much faith into the Bible in a modern day society?
It's up to you. It's up to, like I said, it's a matter of faith.
Mm-hmm.
It is an ancient document, and it's been proven to be right a number of ways over the years. It has very good provenance. It's the Isaiah scroll from the Qumran, for example, was only different from our modern version of it in the Hebrew.
Yeah.
By 3 different letters, and those letters were just variations of the proper letters. And so it was basically exactly the same document. It's perfectly transcribed down from 2,000 years or more.
Right.
And it's a very reliable document in terms of its provenance. In terms of what it says,
Mm-hmm.
it may or may not be true, but it's a fascinating riddle. If you don't necessarily like what it says, it's an interesting riddle to try to figure out.
Yeah.
Many leaders have done that just to find themselves in it. Adolf Hitler actually read the book of Daniel and said, no, it's all wrong. I read about that once. He actually read the Bible and learned it very well, and but he didn't like it. But he was fascinated by it.
Are there any other
fascinating read?
Are there any other religious books or religious philosophies out there that concur with the Christian Bible?
Judaism and Islam, mainly the religions of the book are the ones that agree, have some agreements.
How about books in China, in Japan, or other parts of the world? Because if the events that were so spectacular that happened in the Bible, wouldn't they also have ripple effects around the world and into the civilizations that were on the earth at the same time?
I haven't actually looked into the Chinese books. It's possible that the records are lost because China had wars going on at the time, and these things may have been lost or purposely buried because maybe they didn't want to have any writings that corroborated a religion that they were opposed to. And so there might be writings that might appear again in the Chinese and other Asian countries or anywhere in the world where they have that information. They just haven't been, it's been lost. There's lots of places in India, for example, ancient temples with ancient treasures which have remained locked up for thousands of years. Who knows what treasures could be found in some of these places? And so they might be there. They just have not been released because either they don't know they're there, or they don't want them to be known because they don't want Christianity to be justified as a rival religion.
Well, in other religions that go back to many years ago, how do they explain the creation of this planet and the human race compared to the Bible?
Creation, the only really distinctive creation stories we have from ancient peoples are the Mesopotamian ones. They're the oldest ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned a new English earlier, which was the Babylonian creation epic, which was derived from an even earlier Sumerian story. Around the time of Abraham, around 2000 BC, they talked about in the lamentation texts. The ancient Sumerians wrote lamentation texts talking about their ancient capital of Sumer, which was Ur of the Chaldees, as it's called in the Bible, or just Ur, which just means city. It's actually a cognate in Hebrew for the word city, which is Ir in Hebrew. And they said that Enlil appeared in the sky around 2000 BC, 2100 BC, and hurled down a fiery spear which destroyed ancient Sumer and the capital city. Now, there's actually, back in the 1980s, they found in southeastern Iraq, which is the same location geographically as ancient Sumer and Babylon, that an asteroid had hit in the southeastern area near the marshes. There's a huge asteroid crater there, which would have destroyed Ur and southeastern Sumer, a massive blast wave, and just basically destroyed the ancient Sumerian Empire, which ended around 2000 BC. And as a result, there was chaos for probably a century or two. But out of that chaos arose the Babylonians. They began to kind of rebuild what had been lost previously. And one of their most important text was the Enuma Elish, or what we call the Babylonian creation epic. And that is a definitive text of the ancient Near Eastern in terms of how the earth was created. And the Babylonian creation epic describes what modern astronomers describe now, is that there was a great vast sea of waters which formed around this ancient god named Apsu, which is a good description. Apsu is, of course, the sun in Mesopotamian belief. And so there were these waters around it which formed the gods, which are the planets, just like the nebular hypothesis, where the sun has this big, great nebular disk around it, which spread out as it spun out, full of gas and dust and water. And so this great supercilian sea, they called it, the great vast ocean, out of which all the planets formed. The planets which were worshipped as gods in ancient Mesopotamia. So the gods were described in the Enuma Elish as being formed out of this vast sea over time, slowly. There were issues, sometimes they conflicted with each other. But basically, they more or less kept their stations. And near the second tablet, there were 7 tablets of this story. One of the planets was named Tiamat, which is a dragon goddess. Caused problems with the other planets and disturbed their orbits and things like that. And so what they did is they brought in this hero from outside of their little group here, who was named Marduk. Marduk was representing the high god of the Babylonians, which in the Babylonian version of this ancient creation epic they inherited from the Sumerians. They replaced Enlil, who formerly replaced Anu, which was the first Babylonian deity. And this Enlil was replaced by their Babylonian god, Marduk, which is the high sky god of Babylonians. And they said that he came in from outside, was given these weapons and armor by the gods, who were farther out in what we call the solar system. And then he was sent towards Tiamat by the gods, and he had a battle with her and defeated her. And they just said that he cut her into 2 pieces, used her head to form the earth, and used her body to form the heavens. And he literally says that he made her tail twist into a circle to form a circle of rocks, which what's called the rakia, which in ancient Mesopotamian literally means a circle of rocks or a hammered bracelet. That's cognate with the word rakia in Babylonian. It's cognate with the word rock. Actually, it's rakas in Babylonian. It's cognate with the word rakia in Hebrew, which means the same thing. And so the tail of the dragon Tiamat was seen as being twisted into the circle around, the sun, which is named Apsu in the myth, forming a circle of rocks around heaven. And then he took her head and used it to form the earth, moving it away from where it was originally to another place, and then also hung the head of one of the leaders of her army that she used to fight against Marduk. She they hung it in the sky over Earth, and it became known as the moon. And so that's how they saw it. These ancient deities were actually the planets were interacting with each other, conflicting, until another god planet came from outside of our system, interacted with the problem planet, Tiamat, the dragon goddess, divided into two pieces, used her tail to form the heavens, or the asteroid belt, and her head to form the earth. And that's basically the paradigm which set the standard for all other creation epics throughout the ancient Near East, influencing as far as Afghanistan and India, possibly China, and as far as south and west as Egypt, and probably other places, really any place where there is civilization. And there was really no really civilized areas from Egypt and Ethiopia and parts of northeastern Africa were fairly civilized, all the way to China. And Europe and everywhere else far south, everything was fairly primitive. Our ancestors, the Caucasians, were very primitive peoples at that time. The really sophisticated people were the ancient Near Eastern peoples in Mesopotamia, northeastern Africa, Central Asia, and so forth. And I'm convinced they have ancient texts hidden away somewhere that tell similar stories, because there's no way they would have known about that.
All right, Doug, stand by. We've got to take our final break for this this hour, the first hour of tonight's show. And stick around, Exonation, for hour number 2. It'll be starting as soon as we have a couple of breaks at the end of this segment. Doug ELWELL's our guest. His website is mysteriousworld.com/journal. And don't forget to go to www.galecrescent.ca to sign our petition. That's Gale Crescent, GALECRESCENT.ca. We'll be back on the other side of this short break, so whatever you do, don't go away.
Have you got cheating on your mind?
How many of you out there have heard of alternative engines? Engines that can run on anything from alcohol to garbage or water. Or carburetors that can get hundreds of miles to the gallon. Or electric or magnetic engines that can practically run forever. You don't know about them because if they were to come into use, they'd put the oil companies out of business. The concept of the internal combustion engine has been obsolete for over 50 years. But because of the oil cartels and corrupt government regulation, we and the rest of the world have been forced to use gasoline for over 100 years. Big business is primarily responsible for destroying the water we drink, the air we breathe, and the food we eat. They have no care for the world they destroy, only for the money they make in the process. How many oil spills can we endure? Millions and millions of gallons of oil are now destroying the ocean and the many forms of life it supports. Among these is plankton, which supplies 60 to 90% of the Earth's oxygen. It supports the entire marine ecosystem, which forms the basis of our planet's food supply. But the plankton is dying. I thought, well, let's go to some remote state or country, anywhere on Earth. But in doing a little research, I realized that these people broker toxic waste all over the world. They basically control the legislation, and in fact, they control the law. The law says no company can be fined over $25,000 a day. If a company is making $10 million a day by dumping lethal toxic waste into the ocean, it's only good business to continue doing this. They influence the media so that they can control our minds. They've made it a crime to speak out for ourselves, and if we do so, we're called conspiracy nuts and we're laughed at. We're angry because we're all being chemically and genetically damaged, and we don't even realize it. Unfortunately, this will affect our children. We go to work each day, and right under our noses we see our car and the car in front of us spewing noxious and poisonous gases that are all accumulative poisons. These poisons kill us slowly, even when we see no effect. How many of us would have believed if we were told 20 years ago that on a certain day we wouldn't be able to see 50 feet in front of us? That we wouldn't be able to take a deep breath because the air would be a mass of poisonous gas? That we wouldn't be able to drink out of our faucets, that we'd have to buy water out of bottles? The most common and God-given rights have been taken away from us. Unfortunately, the reality of our lives is so grim nobody wants to hear it. Now I've been asked what we can do. I think we need a responsible body of people that can actually represent us rather than big business. This body of people must not allow the introduction of anything into our environment that is not absolutely biodegradable or able to be chemically neutralized upon production. And finally, as long as there's profit to be made from the polluting of our earth, companies and individuals will continue to do what they want. We have to force these companies to operate safely and responsibly, and with all our best interest in mind, so that when they don't, we can take back our resources and our hearts and our minds and do what's right.
What I feel, I can't say. But my love is up you anytime of day.
And welcome back. There you had some very fine words of wisdom by Steven Seagal from the movie On Deadly Ground. And if you get an opportunity to watch it, and it makes a lot of sense. And you know what? We're learning now that the world isn't as it's put up to be. That it's true. The media does play a major way in how we perceive in order for them to deceive. Does that make sense? Yeah. You know, there's so much disinformation out there. There's so much, oh heavens, lies that are being perpetrated by not only major media sources, but these up-and-coming people who get a hold of a podcast and away they go. They think they're God's gift to broadcasting when they're nothing else but a conspiratorial soup, just feeding gullible people who are looking for answers that they can't find in reality. And it's really pathetic. Use your brain, use your knowledge, do your research, and look for the truth. That's all I can tell you. That's the best I can tell you after doing this show for over 30 years now. Doug Elwell's our guest. www.mysteriousworld.com/journal. Doug, why do you think that all this information about the Bible, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and everything else comes from this little part of the world, and that it isn't widespread, across Asia, across Africa, or across North America, but only this little spot in the planet?
Well, a lot of the knowledge comes from not just ancient Israel. One could argue that was the most important place. Probably what it was is there was ancient temples, very ancient temples all over the area, because that's where mankind originated, actually, in northeast Africa, the bridge across to Israel and everything between Mount Sinai and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
So all the ancient temples were there, and all the most ancient traditions were there. And so that's where things kind of started. So everything has been devolving since that time, or evolving from there. And it wasn't just the ancient Israelites. Really, the more ancient people were the ancient Babylonians, and before them the Sumerians, or even older than the Egyptians by a few hundred years. I think it's maybe 500 years, actually.
Wow.
And so, even though the Egyptians were very ancient, had a lot of wisdom, ultimately the Sumerians were really the first real civilization. And it was interesting, they just kind of appeared out of nowhere with a complete language, literature, scientific knowledge, and everything. Before that, there was nothing, and then boom, the Sumerians in the space of a century or less. And so, obviously, they were planted there on purpose by somebody. The Egyptians were a similar situation. They, too, just came out of nowhere with a complete system in place at the beginning. It didn't evolve over time. It was put in place and perfect at the beginning and gradually actually devolved. Both of them did. They began adding their own ideas and myths and legends and just kind of fantasy and superstition. One of the reasons I think that God took the Israelites out of Egypt is because they'd lost a lot of the original truth that God had told them, or somebody had told them, and had kind of devolved into fantasies and worshiping all these god deity things they put together. A lot of these deities, these animal-headed gods and so forth, are probably originally supposed to be as images intended to show scientific facts and truths and stuff. but they began to forget what they actually originally meant, which were just symbolic for complex concepts, and just worship them as if they were gods. It's like worshiping truth or love or time. It just doesn't make any sense, but they didn't get that. Mankind evolved into a situation where they'd lost their knowledge and became lost in superstition. The Bible says, "My people are failing due to lack of knowledge," and that was true of the Egyptians and the Sumerians and everybody else, because they flawed away from rationalism, what we would call rationalism in the West, which is really actually a Western concept. The ability to think logically, and just fell into fantasy and superstition, and eventually forgot how to fix the very machines and read the scripts that they themselves wrote in previous generations, and evolved into anarchy and just collapsed. That can happen to any civilization, including our own. And so we always have to make sure that we teach every generation how to think logically, how to understand their past, and honor it so we can have a future that is contiguous. Keeping the best of the old and bringing the best of the new.
All right. When we look at the entire Bible, it's a great guideline for civilizations to live by. But when push comes to shove, how do we know it just wasn't a group of elders led by Moses, because he wrote the first 4 books of the Bible, that decided, I don't know why the sky is up there. I don't know why this is there. Oh, wait a minute. How about if it's this reason or that reason? How do we know that any of this is actual fact and not just the stories of elders trying to make some sense of a world that they couldn't understand?
There's some speculative stuff in there, like the writings of Solomon and the Ecclesiastes and stuff. Wisdom literature talking about exactly that. Why are we here?
Right.
What's the point of all this? That's handled in the wisdom literature. But the rest of it, I think, is fact, because it's very well attributed by actual locations. All the names of the places, all of the places are still there. And the traditions of the local Arabs still hold for these places. Nothing changed. Just the names have changed to Arab names, but that's it. Everything else is still the same. And of the histories of Israel, they show up in Egyptian texts as the Habiru and the Mesopotamian literature. And they talk about Israelites kings that they defeated, and Shishak defeated an Israelite king somewhere around 1200 BC. It's written down in the Egyptian annals. It's all very well attested. So these things, even though not every single fact and bit of information is not attributed in local other texts from other countries, so much of it is that it's clear that the Bible is true enough to be considered to be an accurate document. Now, whether or not it's perfectly word for word accurate, I don't know, but I think it's pretty close.
But
the more we study it, the more accurate it becomes.
Sure, but I'm sure that many will agree that the Bible is based on your own interpretation.
What do you mean, the historical part or the theological part?
The theological part.
Well, theology is always up to interpretation. There's no question about that. It's a matter of faith. If you're talking about historical facts, that's something else. But
yeah,
that can be proven. But faith is something different.
We've got a couple of minutes left, Doug. How close do you think we are to the second coming?
I think we're getting pretty close now. I think the tribulation may start in the next couple of years. It's beginning to look like we're all lined up because, for example, the conflict with the Russians, what just happened with Syria, that sort of thing is all part of the end time scenario. It is said that kind of implied in the prophecy of Dan, one of the descendants of Israel, is that Dan is a Judah. Dan is like a lion's whelp; he shall leap from Bashan. Bashan is the most contested part of northeastern Israel, which is held. It's contested by both Israel, Syria, and Russia, and it looks like it might be a flashpoint for the next world regional war in that area. We just had an uprising of overthrow of Assad. And so the Russians are probably going to retaliate. They might be the spark point for the next great war. Not necessarily World War III, but a great regional war, which could match up with the Gog and Magog war talked about in Ezekiel 38. I think the Gog-Magog war actually will precede the actual 7-year tribulation. Or maybe it'll be part of the first part of it. But if Ezekiel 38 kind of implies that there might be a nuclear exchange because it describes fire falling on Magog and the Isles. Magog is ancient Ukraine area and also Western Russia. And the Isles referred to the islands of Europe and also probably what we call North America.
Wow.
So island nations surrounded by waters, will have fire fall on them, as will Magog. And so that might be a limited nuclear exchange, which may result in the signing of a 7-year treaty and test, nuclear proliferation ban.
Doug, we've got to say so long for tonight, my friend. We've run out of time. Doug, thank you very much for joining us, and I look forward to the next time you join us and give us some more information and food for thought. Exonation, Doug Elwell has been our guest this hour. www. All right, do you have your pencils and paper ready? www.mysteriousworld.com/journal. And we'll be back on the other side of this break as hour number 2 commences right now here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't go away.